experience into this incredible other dimension that we all are a part of and we've all come from and we all go back to. So hopefully it's a good one. I haven't even read it myself, but hopefully this topic just gives you a whole new way of looking at life and a different perspective on this everyday reality we face in this physical realm. And when you start to read these experiences and see how many there are, how common certain aspects of them are, you begin to realize this dimension we're living now is an incredible one, but the one we come from and go to is probably even more spectacular. So let's have a look at today's experience. This one is from a girl called Ashli, and it's from the Near Death Experience Research Foundation website, or nderf.org. Ever since I can remember, I had a distinct feeling that I do not belong here and that this place is not my home. I grew up with an abusive father whose violence was unpredictable daily. He also hit my mother and my sister. My parents divorced when I was 12. Part of me was relieved and the other part of me was sad from huge changes. My older sister went off to college in another state. My mother was very depressed, although she was very good, kind, and supportive of me. I started hanging out with the wrong crowd. Some of my friends were nice and had integrity. Others seemed to violate my trust. I ran away from home when I was 15 years old. I had very terrifying experiences on the streets, like being kidnapped by a psychotic cocaine dealer. I have PTSD that started with my father when I was young. Now I'd rather be alone with only a few friends that I can trust, rather than try to please others like I did before. In 1989, I felt like I had been through a personal war with many heartless predators. I was having migraines and headaches every day for months, and I just couldn't take it anymore. I was emotionally destroyed. I felt like my mum was falling apart. I had no other family or for my support system, and I was surrounded by the wrong people who were so corrupt and immoral. I went back onto my waterbed and was waiting for all those pills I took with the vodka to start taking effect. There was no particular thought at first, just a feeling. It was a powerful feeling. I was telling my body, it's time for me to go now. I wanted to go and was ready to let it all go. Right then, I felt this bizarre large thump in my chest. Everything started going dark. A few seconds later, I suddenly found myself looking down on my best friend's head and understanding that she was crying, frantic, and calling for my mother. My mother ran into the room. Initially, I didn't understand what was happening. I thought it was odd that they were having some kind of panic over someone in my bed, and I didn't understand who was in my bed. Then I looked down closer and saw a familiar face. I was stunned for a moment, realizing, oh, that's my body. Poor thing. Goodbye, old friend, I thought to myself. I feel slightly guilty that I was only a little worried about my mum being sad if I died, but I felt like she would be okay in about a year. Suddenly, I felt this incredible freedom. It was like a rush of immense joy and liberation. I was no longer limited by my body and I could just completely be myself. I felt confident, even brave. I was floating upwards, but not too fast. I saw everything, but with added colours, added textures, and even added feelings. It sounds a little funny, but even the molecules in the wood in the ceiling that I floated through had some kind of stagnant energy. I saw the roof of my townhouse complex and the pool. Then I started going a little faster. Suddenly I was past the clouds and into the stars. I could see the moon, but it had different kind of hue around it. It was the same moon that I've always cherished, but the glow now showed a purple hue. In fact, I could see purple almost everywhere until I entered the churning darkness. I didn't understand it until later, but I was seeing reflections of other spiritual energy that was like me, but in the universe. I entered into an area that was farther away from the stars and darker, but I was so focused on exploring this whole new feeling of freedom that I wasn't really paying attention. It's almost like I just wandered right in, even not even thinking about my safety. It was all new and exciting. I was getting used to my new senses, the new reality, and realizing that I was able to see so much despite not having eyes. This place, darkness that I gradually entered into, was like a giant area of thick blackness that was churning into itself. It had a dull roar of low hum in the background. It was a substance that was moving very slowly in a predictable direction. It didn't feel like it was good or bad, but rather just neutral. After a moment, I knew that other beings were coming closer to me. I also knew they were unfriendly with bad intentions towards me. I suddenly felt very vulnerable, having no idea if I even had any form of protection or power to avoid these negative beings. As they got closer, I felt who they were. I felt their feelings, their thoughts, and their personalities. I knew that they were never humans, but I didn't understand what they were. They were creatures who started reading my thoughts. I didn't want them to do that because it was scaring me. Then air thoughts and feelings started intruding on my own thoughts, and I didn't want that either. I didn't know what was happening or how to stop it. The followers of the lead creature did not have eyes, noses, or a mouth. They didn't have body structures like you would think of as typical or normal. It was like there were contortions of wretched anguish and misery. The leader was gigantic with some red and orange colours in it and about 18 or 20 feet tall. This being was not a male or a female. It was a monster with no gender. While it did not have a physical body, its energy was like a deeply intelligent being, like a deranged serial killer of the innocent. I could sense its heartlessness and its vindictiveness. As they got closer to me, the leader, using a strange voice of rage, and it hated me. I mean, it literally hated me. I asked it bluntly, "Why are you so angry at me? Who are you? I don't understand why you hate me so much." The first thing it said to me was, "Don't you even know who you are?" And I replied, "Who am I?" The leader seemed to be exploding at this point. It said, "God, the Father. You don't even know you're a child of the Father? It's not fair. You should be just as doomed as we are." That's when I started to really have a feeling of terror. I called out immediately, "Jesus, save me, I'm scared. Jesus, where are you? Help me." I knew instantly that I would be rescued. Then the light of Jesus rapidly moved toward me. The demons immediately started backing away. I was suddenly pulled out of the churning blackness and into a tunnel of light. It was filled with beautiful, powerful light. I knew I was completely safe and surrounded by love, goodness, wisdom, and authority. Jesus embraced me. He was not in a body, but was a being of light in the brightest white golden light. It did not hurt my eyes. The bright white golden light is all about what is good, healthy, kind, and loyal. It's also a safety, integrity, trustworthiness, honesty, and kingly. When he embraced my soul into his soul, it was like every bit of pain in my spirit was cleansed and healed. But this was only during the embrace. Jesus Christ's spirit was like the equivalent of 500 feet wide and 1,000 feet tall. I instantly knew it was him, and he reassured me and calmed me down. He told me that since I was already there with him, that he was going to show me my life to help me understand about many things so that I would be more patient when I returned to my body. I refused to go back into my body. He was very patient and gentle with me. He knew I was upset and he was determined to have me calm down, trust, and listen to him. So I did. I was so indescribably happy and more at peace than ever before in my entire lifetime. I was willing to listen to whatever he wanted to tell me. Where we were, it was like a part of heaven, but I didn't see any relatives or anything. This was like a special place reserved for me. I say reserved, like I was in a different section of heaven. During my life review, I felt and saw everything I had ever said or done. I saw every impact I had on others, whether intentional or not, like a ripple on the water. He showed me my very essence and explained that different souls have different roles, depending on who they originated from and what they did to themselves regardless of the situations. Most important of all was how they responded to love or goodness. Overall, Jesus told me that not only did I have enough goodness in me, but that despite my few weaknesses, I will mature and that I am destined to go to heaven by virtue of who I am. I asked, "Who am I then? Why is this such a big deal, who I am?" Jesus explained that there are different levels of goodness. Some people have potential for goodness and they can get into heaven. Some people are basically born with so much goodness already in them that they don't have to try very hard to get into heaven. Then there are those who are descendants of God's original energy, who God is drawing back unto himself. I told Jesus I didn't understand God, and I was still a little bit mad at God for allowing all the suffering on earth. Jesus told me that it was basically ridiculous of me to be mad at God, because that's like being mad at my own arm or leg. He said that we all have spiritual jobs to complete on earth. I told Jesus that whatever my job is, I don't want it, and I'm too tired to do it anymore. I felt Jesus almost laughed, but it was like he was slightly amused and simultaneously worried about me. Jesus and I had instantaneous communication. Jesus told me that there have been many souls like me around the world, whose job it is to be God's witnesses. He said that is why I go through so much suffering and experience so much evil. It's not because I am evil, but because evil wants to destroy anyone and anything that is good. Evil works through people's weaknesses. Jesus showed me a part of God's order of the universe, and he said that's the one thing I'm not allowed to bring back with me, is the knowledge of how it all works. He explained that the knowledge would interfere with my spiritual growth. The only thing I remember about the part is concluding that it was so complicated there's no way anyone could understand it in the first place. I finally understood that Jesus was going to send me back into my body no matter how much I protested. I needed to finish my job in this life for myself and for God. I was still a little sad because I didn't want to leave him, and I loved being around him. In 2004, I got to that point again, just like I was in 1989, when I just couldn't take it anymore. I was in physical pain, felt extreme loneliness, and the people I surrounded myself were just using me and not being there for me when I needed support or help. I tried to kill myself again. I hoped that I would just never wake up after taking pills. I think my entire system was so overloaded with poison and the intensity of stress that it caused the whole left side of my body to go limp. My arm felt weird and heavy. I think I had a TIA stroke, but I'll never know for sure. I literally felt what seemed like a deep thunder. It was a voice that I'd felt both in and outside of my head, telling me authoritatively that I am with you. You can do this. Do not step out of your place. I started crying and hyperventilating. All I know is right after that, I felt like I left my body for the second time in my life. I recognized going through the ceiling and going through space as I passed the stars. But this time, when I saw that darkness and the distance, I avoided it. I called out for Jesus again. I saw Jesus as this beautiful, bright, familiar light of love again, but this time behind him there was a new presence I'd never seen before. The presence filled the entire space or sky around us. It was a horizon of spirit that was so gargantuan, like Jesus Christ times 20 billion. It was God. God the Father told me in strict terms that I cannot escape my body again, that I will finish my job on earth. This was not just for his glory, but for my own spiritual state. He said that if I ever try to commit suicide again, that he has the power to intervene and send one of his other children to stop me, or make another suicide attempt fail. I was a little scared and very sad and a bit ashamed. I cried out to him like I never have before. What can I do? I have no family to help me. I feel so alone. Almighty God then said in a booming voice, but in a very loving way without hurting me, you have not been alone for even one moment in your entire life. I have been there ready to be with you as soon as you reach for me, as soon as you ask for me. I have also worked through my gift to you of Jesus Christ. I love you, and you are my child. I will say it again so you remember. You are my child, and I love you. God showed me something like a movie. He showed me how much I've grown spiritually, even though I may not know it yet. God told me that He's proud of me and that I've almost finished. He said that if I can just complete my work here, all of my eternity will be filled with the love and peace that I need. I apologized to God and told Him that I would do my best and that I would try to remind myself that this suffering in this life and in my body will all be forgotten when I'm allowed to stay in heaven. Both Jesus and God reassured me that I will absolutely go to heaven because that is my destiny. When I finish my spiritual journey and I've completed my word for God, then I will fit perfectly into God's almighty puzzle. So that's the end of Ashli's experience. Initial impressions are this experience is written by someone who is well, this experience is very reflective of what the good and the bad and the heaven and the hell, the polarities we see in this reality and experience regularly on this life as a human being. But for me, the next dimension, although there probably are areas of darkness and hell and more heaven type dimensions, I think, that there's going to be a lot more to it than just that love versus fear or light versus darkness polarity, because uh, that just seems to be a bit of a reflection of what we experience here as life as a human. I think, knowing the limitlessness of God, that there's going to be a lot more to it. And people, when they go and experience these other dimensions, they describe it by the human emotions they would have felt in a similar situation in their physical realm. For example, when she goes to see this darker place in the experience I just read, she starts feeling scared, which is a very human thing to feel, and the opposite of that when she meets with Jesus. So for me, there's got to be a lot more to this other dimension, and I guess human emotions and interpretations are the limit we have here, because we can't describe what other people are experiencing in any other way. So we have to do it through experiences we've had on earth and relate it to that, and the emotions we felt when we had these experiences. So let's go through it again. So this young woman or girl is, having a tough life. She's had a few incidences that have really upset her. She says she was in an abusive, her dad was abusive and violent daily. She uh, had some pretty dodgy friends and was kind of associating with people in the wrong crowd. So she decides eventually that she has had enough. It doesn't actually say how old she was, but she decides to run away. And from there, obviously, as a 15-year-old, when you're running away from home, you're going to probably find even more problems, and life's going to spiral into even more challenging situations. I guess not all the time, but generally speaking. And in her case, she is not the exception. She decides she has had enough. She doesn't say exactly what is the precursor to her wanting to finally end it all. But in her case, she just dives straight into the description. She says she takes all the pills and drinks all the vodka and waits for the effects of this medication to start wiping her life out. She describes her transition into the next dimension as a powerful feeling. She says, I find this sentence quite interesting. She says, I was telling my body it's time for me to go now. So she is, I guess, in the soul form now. She is able to differentiate between the physical body and the I, which is the spirit, observing the body and realizing what's going on. And it's like her soul is telling her body, let's let go, let's detach, let's move on to this next dimension. And with that, there's a large thump in her chest, and everything goes black. And this is, I guess, when she separates from her body. And as this happens, it seems that there becomes she steps into a little bit of confusion because she's no longer in her body, and she's actually looking down at the scene of her suicide, and she can see her best friend in there and also her mother crying, and they're crying over her bed, and she's not quite sure why they're doing this. So during this separation, obviously there's been a bit of confusion as to what the scene of her leaving her physical body was all about, and they are so she's looking at her body and she doesn't quite recognize who it is. This is always amazing to me that you know, it happens quite every often. People leave their body and they suddenly in this other realm, and they can't really recognize who that body is, or what's going on, and it takes them a moment for the penny to drop and for them to actually work out what is going on there. So I don't know why this is. You know, the spirit is maybe that initial transition creates a little bit of confusion, and they can't get their head around. I guess it's a pretty massive thing when you go from the physical to this other dimension. Like, you're no longer using the senses of the body you once were to interpret the environment that you are in. You're not in a physical realm anymore. Your your form is obviously totally different, and I guess when that happens, you've got a lot going on, and you somehow can lose track of what you actually were. But for her, the penny drops pretty quickly. She suddenly regains her bearings, so to speak, or her spirit becomes aware of what the situation is that she's looking at. But you know, it's just what I've read out there. It's such a miraculous thing to go from a physical form and then transform into this other dimension and still be looking down at a scene, and number one, being able to see it, number two, being able to understand what is actually going on there, to recognize who these people are you're seeing, to it makes me think, what's the point of even having a physical body if we're able to have all these senses and think like we do as a human without having to have the heaviness and the physicality of actually being in human form to do it? Can't we just all run around in spirit form without bodies on as our shells um, to have an experience? But I guess there's something that being in this shell, being in this body, gives us that running around in spiritual form does not. And I guess that is part of the contract we have to sign up to when we come down to this physical realm, is that we have to accept that we're going to be in this body for, anywhere from, a couple of years or less, and through to, up to 100 years. And that's just the way it is in this place. And generally speaking, people are pretty happy to get rid of this shell. But in this case, she is looking down at the scene and she remembers what's going on. And suddenly after she remembers, she gets this incredible feeling of freedom. So in her case, it's like most, she is lost that human form and she is just in joy that she no longer has to carry this heavy thing around, and has feelings of limitlessness and movement. She can go anywhere. Her experience of her surroundings is more profound. She sees more colors, more texture, and can just generally sense the aliveness of even supposedly, dead objects. Like she says, she sees the wood in the ceiling and can sense that it has its own energy, uh, and she can fly through things. Is no longer constrained by what we would be constrained with in this physical realm. She can go through walls and roofs and still experience the world around us, just in a totally different way. However, it all takes a bit of a dark turn next, because as she's flying around and loving this new form she's in, she notices something in the distance that looks like a dark, how does she describe it? She gets drawn to this place she sees out of the corner of her eye. It's like a giant area of thick blackness that was churning into itself. So to me, what kind of images are conjured up there? I guess a little bit like a really dark, heavy tornado, just slowly turning, and lots of lack of light, and also similar sort of sound, I guess. There's like a dull, raw type noise being given off as she gets closer to this darker place in her experience. But the funny thing is, as she gets closer, she's not picking up anything like this is a good place to be or this is a bad place to be, but rather it was neutral. So she isn't scared by it, not yet. She's just a little bit curious as to what this place actually is like. But as she gets closer into this new place, she starts to sense that there's other beings close by, and they seem to be a little bit unfriendly, and she can pick up this negative vibe, and and she gets even closer, and then she starts to experience or feel who they actually are. She can pick up what their feelings are towards her, what they're thinking, what sort of personalities, but she can also notice that they aren't humans. They're beings, but they're not, they've never been in human form. I found this sentence quite interesting because she's able to somehow read these beings so well, to the extent that she can even tell what kind of incarnations they've had, what kind of life experiences they've had in the physical, and she can tell that they've never taken on human form. I wish she went into a little bit more detail there and kind of told us how they, if she can read them that well, how they ended up in this negative state if they've never even experienced life in the physical as a human. Because generally speaking, I kind of associate evil spirits as potentially spirits who once were in human form and just had horrible lives and crossed over and didn't really want anything to do with the light of God, and therefore stayed in this negative spiritual state and held on to these negative human emotions that keep them in this darker dimension. But in this case, she says the spirits that are pestering her were never human beings. And yeah, I'd just like to know how she knew that, and if she knew any more of their history as to how they evolved to the point of waiting for human souls to cross over and starting to prey on them. So she's starting to get scared now. She's thinking, okay, they're starting to read my thoughts now, and they're starting to see how I'm feeling, and this is really starting to freak me out. And she starts to get a little bit panicky and anxious, and wonders how she's ever going to stop this, and where she found herself. And then she starts to describe what these beings actually look like. They didn't have eyes or noses or a mouth. They didn't have a body structure like I guess we would you know think of as in human form. They were I like this sentence. They were contortions of wretched anguish and misery. So they sound very demonic and scary, and sound a lot like demons that are straight out of hell. Now, I wonder, often when I'm reading these experiences, like, is this person really in hell, or is this her own being getting drawn into some kind of experience just through the state of what that spirit has been through in life on earth? Or is it just like, it's that old question of, is this experience they're having a creation of the person experiencing it, or is it the universe giving them that experience? And sometimes I wonder which one it is. Because I kind of find it difficult for a universe that is made of love, where love is the core of what it is, that it would actually give a soul an experience of darkness like this. I think there is some part of us that is not drawn to these darker experiences, but somehow create them in our own being. And why we do that, I don't actually know. But yeah, yeah, it's hard, isn't it, to understand this theory of heaven and hell, and why there are darker places in the universe according to people who have these experiences. But in her case, she is able to have the awareness to call out to Jesus, and as she does that, she is taken into a place of light. So if any of us find ourselves in this situation, I guess we just have to remember to call out to the light, to love, to God, and they will come and rescue us. And in her case, she gets taken to a tunnel that is filled with beautiful, powerful light that was completely safe, and in this light there's the usual features of knowledge, wisdom, love, goodness. And in her case, she called out for Jesus, so he's the guide, or the symbol, or the other being in this experience that is radiating all these positive qualities. She says that Jesus Christ's spirit was the equivalent of 500 feet wide and 1,000 feet tall. She says she instantly knew him and was reassured by him, and he calmed her down. And then Jesus says that he's going to show her life to help her understand things that would be helpful to her when she refuses to go back to her body. He says that she says that he's very patient and gentle and a good listener, and and then they have a bit of a life review, and Jesus shows him certain scenes that um, this lady Ashley has done, and the impact she has on others, just like most life reviews. They're showing how when we talk or think even negative thoughts about other people, or I guess about our experience in general, that ripples out and affects everyone around us. And when obviously we're thinking like that, that has a high chance, or talking negatively, that has a high chance of putting other people in um, negative frame of mind, and therefore they are more likely to repeat the negativity that you initiated. So, and often in these experiences, this is demonstrated like a stone thrown into a lake and the ripples that shoot out from that in all directions. And this next paragraph I find a little bit confusing. Um, so she's talking to Jesus, and she's asking Jesus, "Who am I? Like, why is it such a big deal who I am?" And then the way Jesus answers her in this experience is he says some people have potential for goodness and they can get into heaven. Some people are basically born with so much goodness already in them that they don't have to try very hard to get into heaven. And then there's another group who are like the descendants of God's original energy, and they they have this connection to God, which I guess basically assures them of getting into heaven. This to me doesn't really gel. Like, um, it doesn't really explain it in a way that I can resonate with. Like, why would some people be come to Earth knowing that they don't have enough supposed goodness in them, that they could end up doing some really bad things on Earth and never experiencing a heaven-like state again in the next dimension? It just, why would people risk coming here if they knew that is the potential outcome of their visit to planet Earth? Wouldn't they just stay in heaven? Um, and why would there be varying amounts of goodness in different people? Like, I think, yeah, this part of the experience for me isn't exactly vibing, and I can't really relate to what's being said here. It kind of runs counter to a lot of what I've read in other experiences, and that is, we're all here to learn and just have this experience as a human, where we're not gonna. There's no such thing as varying amounts of goodness in us. I mean, what even is goodness anyway? Because as we know from reading these experiences, there's no such thing as good or bad, because what one might consider as a good thing to happen, the next person might think that's terrible. It's all about personal perspective, and what makes one person happy is not going to make the next person, and it doesn't make much sense for someone to have this explained to them in their experience as an answer as to how you get into heaven. Is depends on how much goodness you have as a person. That because people are dealt some pretty hard cards in this life, and find it very difficult to be aligned with things like love, and it's got nothing to do with what sort of person they are. It's all to do with the experiences they've had and been exposed to, and that's going to push them towards darker elements in life. And that's not to say that people can't turn their lives around, or even should turn their lives around. It's just that some people have an easier ticket to finding inner peace than others. And anyone can change, and no one has to. It's totally up to the individual. And I guess what I prefer to, whether something is good or bad, I prefer to use the terminology of something either works or it doesn't work, and we can all be the judge of what that is as an individual. So she goes on to say that Jesus had telepathic communications with her. Um, she says that lots of us have, the experience of being God's witness. So I guess by that she means lots of people have had near-death experiences. Lots of people are having constant spiritually transformative experiences, and it can happen to anyone at any time. And this is just part of, I guess, us learning who God is, and as a species becoming more comfortable with that. And then it kind of goes into this next sentence, says that evil works through people's weaknesses. Jesus showed me that he said that evil works by exploiting people's suffering and using that to make itself more powerful. So Ashli doesn't say whether she changes, but as time goes by, she has another experience, which is, let me see, 15 years later, she's again finding herself in a similar position, suicidal, lonely, in lots of pain, hanging out with the wrong people. So again, she decides to take her own life. And again, the same thing happens. So she leaves her body, she finds herself traveling into this next dimension. And again, she sees this darker area in the distance, but because of what happened last time, she is smart enough this time to avoid it. And she asks for Jesus, and then Jesus starts guiding her. And this time they get to fly through the universe. They pass lots of stars. They just have a little bit of a journey together, and Jesus ends up taking her to this presence that just fills everything. It's 20 billion times bigger than Jesus' spirit, she says, and this time it is God, and God says in a booming voice, "You have never been alone for 1 minute in your entire life. You have to remember that loneliness, that feeling you get, that all of us get as human beings, is not a true reflection of what reality is, that God is always connected with you. There's other beings, other guides, other angels, always there with all of us all the time. And just because we are in this shell of a body that blocks that out and gives us the illusion that we are separate from everything else, it's not a true representation of the truth of reality. So God says, "You are my child and I love you." And then God shows her this movie of how much she has grown spiritually, but didn't really know it yet. Now, when I read that line, I think of other experiences where people are kind of told that what we understand this reality from the human point of view is totally different to how the spirit or soul perceives the experience we're having. So even though this life here on earth can seem tough and hard, and we don't seem to be getting anywhere from a spiritual perspective, we are learning, we are growing, we are evolving, and this is what God says to her. She says, look, he says, he or she, God is genderless in my opinion. Anyway, God says to Ashli, you have grown spiritually, and we really need you to stay on earth because you're doing my work there. You are not there for very long in the grand scheme of things, and when you finally cross over for real, you will have this eternity in heaven. So this experience, that's pretty much the end, is very much based on this heaven, hell, fear, love. Uh, it's very stereotypical, I guess, of what a lot of religion teaches, that there is a God that we can go to for eternity in heaven if we do the right things here on earth. And I, although, I agree with some of that, it's good to live a good life, it's good to love others. I agree with a lot of the principles of what heaven, of what some religions tell us. It's just, I don't think they satisfactorily, anyway, in my opinion, actually describe what this next um, reality, this next dimension is truly like. And I guess if people have lived in strong Christian homes or had that upbringing as a kid, that this is what happens to you, you go to heaven or hell, I guess there's some chance that somehow ends up creating the experience when you cross over, you go to that kind of reality. I don't know how that works or why it works that way, but I guess it's similar for other um, religions too. They might go to a more Buddhist type environment, or Hindu, or Muslim. I don't know. It might have an experience more aligned with what those teachings teach. But for me, the truer ones, the ones that are the most profound to me, are the ones that are free from this heaven hell type description of what happens in eternity. That um, I love the ones that go to the light, but free of any kind of religious connotations. It's just an experience with the light, and doesn't go into religious figures, because that just, for me, clouds my judgment and starts attaching labels to what this next dimension can be like, because it's, once you start bringing Jesus and stuff into it, and look, the guy is awesome, and I love the guy, and he's an amazing spiritual being, but once you start bringing his name into it, my mind just starts attaching all these things I've learnt on earth as to what this next dimension is like. So I just like to keep it simple. I like to think, okay, live in the moment as much as you can. So use that Buddhist philosophy and try to spread, embrace, live the concepts of what you consider love to be on this planet, which is, big kind of Christian philosophy as well. So, yeah, I just try to keep it pretty simple in terms of the way I live my own life, and try to live by those two kind of um, strong bits of wisdom, I think. And if you do that, you can't go wrong. Well, you can, because it's hard to do. It's hard to live in the moment and to constantly be loving. But as time goes by, I feel very strongly guided by the light, and just as I get older, I get more and more wisdom as to how to bring this into my own experience on a more regular basis, and just try to preach, well, not preach, but live exactly what this wisdom is telling me as the best way to cope with this human experience. And by doing that, you're just going to help others do the same, which is a great outcome. So for me, this wasn't my favorite experience. I probably kind of hinted at that a little bit as I've read through it. There wasn't, the depth to it that I usually like. It was very kind of good, bad, heaven, hell, demons, angels kind of thing. And like, there's nothing wrong with that. That's what this person experienced, and I'm appreciative for them sharing it. But for me, I like a little bit of depth and wisdom, and how these experiences have changed the person as well, which there's no real commentary on that. But this poor lady, she's had it tough. She's really tried seriously to end her life a couple of times, and hopefully this message was able to help her transform her life the way she needed to pull her out of that darkness. And either whether that was just to scare her away through the demons in her first experience, to scare her straight, or to get her to embrace the love of God and Jesus a little bit more, to help her gravitate towards the love and bring that into her experience as a human. But yeah, there's some good little messages in there. Like, we all have this kind of connection to God, and we're never alone. And we are this incredible eternal spirit, which is obviously a key theme in all near-death experiences, that once we cross over, it's just the opening to a whole new world. But if I could sit down and ask God a question, I would, one of them after reading this experience would be, okay, does everyone have their own unique dimension waiting for them? Does our dimension waiting for us have a lot to do with our own perception of what this dimension is going to be like, or does the universe create this dimension for us to experience a situation of that can give us the maximum evolution that we need? Or why does some people go to these darker realms, and others go to these heaven-like places? Like, there's so many questions. I could sit down and interview God for hours, obviously, like most of us, and one day we will get the answers, I guess, is the answer to what I just said there. But thank you for listening to me for another episode. I hope your spiritual evolution is noticeable in this experience. I hope you're able to kind of use the challenges that life throws at you as a bit of a beacon as to how you can grow and evolve, rather than let them drag you down into the muck, and just continue doing the best you can. We all have a loving God that is there for us all the time, and we just do our best, I guess, in this realm. And there's no such thing as good or bad. Everyone's doing perfect, really. You're just exactly where you're meant to be right now, whether that's in a painful place or in a place of light and love. And hopefully this experience has given you a little bit more of a connection to God, and puts you in that frame of mind that is a little bit more aligned to the light. So thank you again, and remember, I love you, and this will continue, this podcast, for a long time, I hope. So keep listening, and keep being your amazing self. Good evening, good morning, whatever it is. See you next time.